to my channel. If you don't know me, my name is Gabby. Nice to meet ya. Today is basically like Clash of the Titans, y'all. Knotless braids versus traditional knot braids. Which one is better? Now, if you're a black girl like me, then you have probably been getting your hair braided for as long as you can remember. Our hair and protective styles have always been a major component in our lives, especially box braids. And in recent years, knotless braids have risen in popularity due to major celebrities such as Beyonce, Rihanna, and Zoe Kravitz being spotted wearing these beautiful braids. Even though knotless braids are kind of the it girl right now, it begins to raise the question, are they better than traditional knot braids? Should we leave knot braids behind? Or is it simply just a battle of preference? We'll see. Knotless braids and traditional knot braids are both protective styles, meaning that they are meant to tuck your hair away and give your hair a break from constant daily manipulation. Just a quick disclaimer, although you may have a protective style in your hair, you still have to make sure that you are caring for your hair, or else the protective style is basically useless. Still make sure that you are moisturizing your hair, that you are tying your hair up at night, and depending on how long you have the protective style in your hair, make sure that you are washing your hair as well. Also, make sure that you are minimizing tugging and pulling on your hair. Meaning, do not constantly put your braids up into a ponytail, and cut down on constantly styling your braids, because again, protective styles are meant to protect your hair from daily manipulation, okay? Okay. But back to the meat and potatoes of the video, knotless braids versus traditional knot-in braids. Let's jump into some of the differences between knotless braids and traditional knot braids. So starting off, the main difference that is most obvious is appearance. Simply a distinct giveaway of knot braids is that there is a knot at the base, i.e. on the scalp, versus knotless braids who do not have that knot at the base or on your scalp. Therefore, traditional knot braids appear more bulky, therefore giving them a less natural type of appearance, versus knotless braids which have a less bulky slash flatter look to them, therefore giving them a more natural appearance. Another difference is the installation technique. With knot braids, you create a knot at the base of the hair and just start braiding and braiding down, and you do not feed more hair into that unless it is for length purposes. Versus knotless braids, they braid a little bit of your hair and then they start using what is called a feed-in technique, where they braid your hair a little bit and then they start to feed in hair as they go along the braid, and they repeat that method until it is to your desired length. Another difference is time. Knotless braids may take a little longer just based off of the technique, but in reality it really depends. The size of the braids really plays a big role in the time. The length of the braids also plays a big role in time, and also some people just braid faster than other people. So for some people it may take less time, for some people it may take more time. Now moving on to how knotless braids may feel on the scalp versus knot braids may feel on the scalp. A huge question is often recovery time. Now with knotless braids, typically the recovery time is not as long as knot braids, simply because based on the technique of braiding your hair a little bit and using the feed-in technique, this helps put less tension on the scalp. This means less pain, and in some cases this also means that you can immediately start styling your braids any way that you desire. We have all had that moment where our hair is so tight that sometimes we don't even want to touch it, we don't even want to do anything with it. sometimes you won't even want to sleep on your hair after getting knot braids. They hurt so much. So if you are a little more tender-headed, then knotless braids might be more for you. Or if you simply just don't want that much tension on your scalp, then try to go with knotless braids. Also, if somebody may have a sensitivity to synthetic hair, have you ever noticed that when you get braids that sometimes your scalp feels itchy or it feels irritated? This may be because of the synthetic hair. If that happens to you, then you might want to look into getting a knotless braids, because like I said, since they have the method of braiding the hair just a little bit and then feeding the hair into the braid as you go along, that synthetic hair is not coming in direct contact with your scalp, so therefore you may have less like itching and rashing side effects due to the synthetic hair. Another thing that people often ask about is weight. How heavy does the hairstyle feel on the scalp? Knotless braids are typically lighter on the scalp because, again, it all goes back to the braiding technique. Knot braids, they start out with a bulk of the hair at the root of your hair. That can make your scalp feel heavier and you can feel more weighed down by your braids, especially if you're somebody who tries to get jumbo braids. From personal experience, that's a heavy hairstyle. Moving on to breakage. Traditional knot braids typically have more breakage than knotless braids. This is because with knotless braids, there tends to be less friction, versus with knot braids, there can be constant tugging and pulling, which is why sometimes you see people who constantly get traditional knot braids. Sometimes their edges can seem to be thinning a little bit. This is all because that hair from the knot is constantly rubbing that hair and putting tension on the scalp, which can cause that hair breakage that we can see, especially around the hairline where these hairs are a little more sensitive and a little more like softer than the rest of our hair. Moving on to the part that we all care about, which is price. Is one cheaper than the other? And honestly, again, it depends. It often depends on, again, the size of the braids, how long you want the braids, if you want specialty color in the braids. Some people charge for time. I'm not even gonna lie, sometimes it depends on which region of the world you're in. You could be in Atlanta or Texas or California and there's 3 different prices, or you can completely go out the country in Africa and that's a completely different price. So again, it really depends. Although some people might charge more for knotless braids, and I honestly think they do because of the popularity. It's supply and demand. If people want more of something, then people are gonna jack up and hype up the price. That's just how it is. That's capitalism for you. Moving on to how long do they last, and again, with both hairstyles, this depends also. But I would say that mostly it depends on the size of the braids that you get. Typically, if you get a smaller size braids, then that will often last longer than if you get a bigger, more jumbo type of braids. I've often seen influencers say that they get their hair braided and they won't keep their hair in for longer than 2 or 3 weeks, and I think that is insane. I am not paying hundreds of dollars and spending almost a day and a half in a chair just to wear my hair for 2 to 3 weeks. I would say on average you shouldn't keep your hair in longer than 2 months. And once you take your hair out, let it breathe for about a week or 2 before you decide to jump right back into another protective style. Some people say that knotless braids don't last as long as knot braids, and again, I think that that is false. I think it depends on how well you take care of your braids, the size of the braids as well. If you take care of the braids, they will last, I promise you. As far as me being team knotless or team traditional knot braids, I am team knotless. I, like many people, had been getting traditional knot braids for years, but then after I did my big chop and my hair grew back a little bit more, I decided that I was going to try knotless, and I have not been back since. Knotless braids just feel lighter on my scalp. The recovery time for me is non-existent. Right after I get my hair braided, I don't feel like my scalp is about to jump off my head and run away from me. I also like how flat and natural it looks when it's coming out my head. It just looks like regular braids that are on my head. And based off of the research and just my own personal experience, I would say that knotless braids are better, but to each his own. As always, I love you all so much for listening. Go ahead and like and subscribe and comment down below. Are you team knotless or are you team traditional knot braids? And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.